Hey, welcome to another episode of the Go With John Show. And today we are sitting down with my mother, Lilian Jorgenson. Interestingly enough, we just wrapped up the recording and Lilian came in and sat down and launched right into her story before we had the mics on. And it was so compelling, I didn't want to interrupt her, but she started talking about the German soldiers in her mom and dad's grocery store back at the end of World War II. So here's Lilian. So, but pretty much your whole life they were there. I mean, they were just...
not my whole life, but the first 5 years
but
of my
you don't
life.
remember, you have no memory without the Germans then.
That's right, no.
Yeah.
But I do remember in the store when the Germans came in the shop and just demanded things that they wanted to get.
Right.
You know, because my father had the grocery store.
Right.
And they would just come in and said, well, I want this and this and this, and take it.
And not pay for it.
No, you
Yeah.
don't, and you didn't have a choice. That's what they did.
Yeah.
Which was pretty awful.
Yeah.
And-
well, they did a lot of awful things.
They did a lot of awful things, and what was also awful, they picked the prettiest buildings in town and just evacuated everybody out, and then Gestapo took over those buildings. And, for 5 years during the occupancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were born in February.
Yeah.
And they came
In April.
in April. So
Yeah.
you had the first 2 months of your life, you lived
Peaceful.
German-free.
Yeah, peaceful. That's right.
Yeah.
And of course, when the war was over, the Germans had to walk back home to Germany because they didn't have transportation. There
Right.
were not enough trains and cars and buses, and so they walked. And it was just maybe a couple of 100 kilometers. And they had to walk right through my father's store because we
Right.
were in
Well,
the
right
middle-
past it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right past the store because we were right in town.
Right.
And that's where I was hanging out in the light post watching everybody walking back.
Right. And one of the soldiers.
Yeah, one of the soldiers sort of picked me up and was going to take me with him. And of course I resisted and ran back.
Yeah.
Then. I remember that. And
So
of
you were
course
5 years old.
I was 5, yeah.
And so what is your first memory of the war being over? Do you remember hearing that it was over,
yeah,
or
yeah.
did they just
Well, yeah,
up and
because
march out?
No, because the war was over 5th of May, and of course because everybody celebrated. I mean, it was everybody out in the streets and everybody cheering, and you now could go out and just celebrating, and
Right.
like they do everywhere.
Right.
And news on the radio, and yeah.
So
I
5th of
remember
May,
that.
and then
Yeah.
do you remember the date that they marched out?
No, but officially the war was over.
So was it
The
a
5th
couple
of May.
days
So
later,
it was-
a couple weeks
I
later?
think it
or-
might have been even during the time they were trying to get back home before
Okay.
officially declared
I got you.
over. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, around that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did your parents manage the store then after? Because you really don't know what it was like before.
No.
Obviously.
Well, managed the store. It was just business went on as usual, but of course everybody was freer to do business, and the rationing of coffee and sugar and butter and some wines all started getting lifted because there was more free movement of merchandise after the war was over. But during the war, you couldn't get anything hardly. You had to have stamps, like food stamps.
Right.
And you have so many stamps you were given per month that you could use. So if you used them up on your coffee on the first week, you would have no coffee for the rest of the month.
So you had to have the stamp
You had to
and
have money and stamps.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
because it was rationed. You couldn't get any more than just exactly
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It is amazing. And
Yeah.
then, of course, remember, in Europe or in Denmark, we start school at age 6.
Yep.
I was 6.5.
Yep.
First grade.
Yep.
No kindergarten.
Yep.
That's, this is so long ago.
Yeah.
So it was amazing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So after the Germans leave and you're running the store, at some point you ran. What did you do in the store? Tell us about how you operated in that store.
Well,
so you went to school.
Well, we went to school. So
Yep.
my brother Kai and myself were always, as a family, we did everything as a family. as soon as we could be of any help running up and down stairs. We lived on the second floor. The store was on the ground level. We were doing things. We were wrapping things. We were, everything from sugar and flour was weighed into bags of 1 pound and 2 pounds to make it quicker to serve.
So it came in
It came
bulk.
in bulk,
Yeah.
yeah. And so we did a lot of that. What was my favorite was putting all the candy into bags, because candies came in a 50-pound tin.
Right.
And then it had to be scooped into bags of 100 gram, and we
Right.
had that on the counter.
So why was
and
that your
chocolate.
favorite?
Well, because then they get to eat the candy as we're stuffing the bags. But we were doing everything, and on my bicycle, when I was just 7, 8, 9 years old, I was delivering groceries on my bicycle to the nearest people around the store. Back then, people could call in and say, I'd like to have a half a pound of coffee and a half a pound of butter and a box of biscuits or something like that delivered, and okay, it would get delivered. Either I would deliver it, or Kai would deliver it, or my father would deliver it. Or we had also someone that would come every afternoon to make deliveries. But sometimes they wanted it at 5:30, and the only one to do it was me. So get on your bike and get it out there. But when I was running the store with the help of the 2 helpers we had in the store, I was... I think I was about 12, 13, something like that. And that was the first vacation my mom and dad had away together.
Right.
For a week.
Well, they actually had you run the store one day when you were 10 years old.
Yeah, well, one day, yeah.
One day. So
right.
you were 10. So tell us about that.
Well, there's nothing more than you open up the store at 7 o'clock and you count the money and you get it in the cash register, and you're there and people come in to buy and you serve them whatever they want. You take care of it.
Yeah.
And then you work all day, and at 6 o'clock you close the store, you count the money, and
take some candy.
And that was it. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing, though, because you look at our your grandkids, my kids, and
that's right. That
you can't hardly get them to do their own laundry, much less pick it up off the floor. You know?
Yeah, well, when you think about it, I guess that was pretty much amazing. But we lived such a well, what can I say? A life that was in order, or you just did things. I mean, you got up in the morning, you went to school, you come home from school, you do your homework. After that, you work in the shop, or you clean, or you do all kinds of things. And then dinner was all together, and after dinner you do the dishes, and homework was in the afternoon too.
Right.
And then you would do other things. So it was just very regimented, I guess, but that's all you know.
Right.
Because it was work. When you're self-employed, you're in charge and responsible for everything, and we were just delegated to do all kinds of things, whatever it was, right from changing all the displays in the windows. So all the canned foods and everything that was in the window for display had to come out, get back on the shelves. New things have to be put in the windows. We had 3 windows to decorate, quote unquote, display.
Right.
And they got changed usually once a month.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
No, well, it was just another job.
Yeah. So your dad was a runner.
My dad was an athlete.
Yes. And where was he born?
Just a few in Kolding.
In Kolding?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. He was born up on Mosevej. Yeah, so my dad was a runner. He was an athlete, and he was an apprentice in the store that he took over. And I don't know anything about the previous owner or anything like that. I don't recollect any information.
Okay.
But, because when I came along, he owned the store.
Right.
So he was an athlete, and he was a runner, and many of his running records were standing actually for years. They weren't beaten by anyone, and all the newspaper clippings and all the premiums, what are they called? All the
times,
the spoons and
trophies
trophies that we have of all his winnings.
Yeah.
So he was mostly a sprinter.
Right.
I mean, you know, it was 1,000 meter, 1,500 meter was his specialty.
Harry Lund.
Harry Lund, yeah.
Yep. We talk about Harry Lund often in our family.
Yeah, that's right. We have all his trophies. That's right.
Yeah.
And and what is really amazing, he wanted to go to the Olympic Games as a spectator. And when we today think back about what he did to get there, it was every 4 years, and he went to the one in Helsinki, and he went to the one in Rome. And it was in Rome he actually got sick in 1960. And so I think and Helsinki was that 1948? I can't remember, but anyway. So in order to make extra money to be able to travel as a spectator to these Olympic Games to another country, which basically is what you were doing, he would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and he would deliver newspapers to all the farmers we call it in the upland, in the surrounding suburbs of our town. So he would drive, and you would deliver bunches of papers. You would take them to distributions places, I guess. But that's what he did in the morning at 4 o'clock.
And what did he do with the money?
And then he saved the money for the trip.
And where did he put it?
Oh, well, we put it away. It was money, and it was kept in different places.
Yeah.
But our favorite place was to keep them in the metal cans of the candy. Because if anybody would break in or whatever, nobody would think to look among these 50 different tall cans of
bulk candy, that one of them was filled with money. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, and for pastime, when we had company and they were playing cards with their friends and sometimes you don't know what to do, our favorite was to get a can of all these change and count the money.
Yeah.
That was really fun.
That was a simpler time.
That's why to this day I just like to have money.
Yeah.
And just to know where it is, to feel it.
The coins.
Yeah.
So, and then where did he meet your mom? Do you know that story?
Oh my God, I don't. I don't even know where they met. No, I don't. Maybe Kai knows. I don't know.
Well, we'll
have to ask him. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, and I thought you would know that story.
That was a dead end. I don't know where they met. We never talked about that.
Yeah. Well, you guys were busy with World War II, and you had some things on your plate.
And remember, then I left home at 16.
Yep. And then, so let's talk about that.
I'm Michael Schnitzer, president of Stanley Martin Custom Homes. Buyers appreciate our focus on energy efficiency and sustainability so that they can lower their utility costs and we can reduce our footprint on the environment. To learn more about our prices and floor plans, visit webuildonyourlot.com. That's webuildonyourlot.com.
My parents had really good friends that lived down in Sønderborg, which is a town very close to the German border in Denmark.
Yeah.
And they owned a photographic shop.
Right.
And were really good friends with the owners of the big new factory, Danfoss, who makes thermostats.
Yeah. So who were your parents' friends?
The photographer.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And they were friends with the owners of the factory.
Okay.
And they told my mom that they knew that family was looking for someone to help in the guest villa.
Right.
Because they didn't want to have any entertaining going on in their private home because they had 5 children and it was their private home, but they had guests coming from all over the world all the time. And so they had a guest villa and it was manned by a lady running the house, and then so a housekeeper, and they needed somebody to help. And so we decided that that would be an amazing opportunity for me to try, working pretty much as an au pair, if you will.
Right.
And having the opportunity to meet people from all over the world. And it was an amazing, amazing time, but very difficult when you think back. So we had this big house,
Right.
and between the two of us, we had to clean it and do everything that goes along with it. It was like a hotel, actually, a little hotel. There were 4 bedrooms, so we could have 4 overnight guests, but we only usually had 1 or 2.
Right.
But every day we had lunch and dinner. And so it would be the owner of the factory and the representatives that came from the department and came from countries everywhere in the world. I had a really good chance to polish up my English, which of course in Denmark, when you graduate from high school, you have 5 years of English, 4 years of German, 2 years of Latin, and 2 years of French.
Right.
So you take the English language a notch up when you have an opportunity to use it.
Right.
And it was there I learned to do everything that has served me for actually the rest of my life in many different situations. For instance, at 11 o'clock, we would get a call that we would have 8 people for lunch at 1. That gives you 2 hours to call the shops to deliver the food, to prepare the food, and to set the table and be ready. And that would
It's not a lot of time.
Not a lot of time. And so the orders would come right away, and we would have the whole Danish smorgasbord on the table with 5 or 6 different courses, including cold cuts and 1 hot dish as well. I learned to serve correctly in the manner that a trained server or waiter or waitress learned back
Right.
in those days, being
Right.
more formal. And when everything was done, of course, everything got back to the kitchen, and then it came for the cleanups.
Right.
Not only do we wash the dishes in brown soap water, then we rinse the dishes in warm vinegar water, and then we polish the dishes and polish the glasses. Every day the silverware had to be polished if it was tarnished. So it kept me working until about 3 o'clock every day.
Wow.
So then I had time off for an hour or 2, but by 4:30 we would know if we were going to have 2 dinner guests or 5 dinner guests or 10 dinner guests, and the whole thing started all over again.
Wow.
And I was working until 10, 11 o'clock in the evening because they would have coffee and cigars and dessert in the living room, just like a normal home.
Right.
And it was my responsibility to be taking care of all of that. And it was the ladies' responsibility to be behind the scenes and make sure everything was running.
Right.
Well, after 6 months, this was really too much for me, and they got someone else to help, and we were 2 of us doing the job that I had been doing. But when we talk about having chicken for dinner, we would get the whole chicken,
Right.
and we would have to pluck it.
Yeah.
If we were having fish for dinner, we would get the whole fish, and you had to scale it and trim it and fix it to serve.
So-
Not like you go to the grocery store today and pick up everything ready to go.
Isn't that nice?
It was really amazing.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was a good lesson.
Yep. Yep.
So
that was when you were 16.
that's when I was 16. So I was there until, oh, and by the way, when you ironed the pillowcases, they were wet because they had to be absolutely perfect. So they were wet and they had starch in them, and you had to keep ironing them until they were dry
Wow.
and stiff and perfect.
Yeah.
But that's a good lesson to know, right?
Yes, it is.
It can serve you right any place. You never know.
Yeah.
So, so I was there and for a year and a half, and then I came back to my parents in the store. And then, of course, my father had what they call representative visiting every month from different companies to place orders on merchandise that he was selling in the store.
Right.
And one of the big sellers were all the canned foods by Plumrose. And the representative had known me for years and years and watched me grow up and was asking my father, well, what is Lilian doing now? And he says, well, she's back home, after working at Danfoss, and we're going to see where she wants to go next. And then he said, I know that there's an opening in London for one of the stores to run the Plumrose account in Selfridges and in Harrods. And she would be perfect for the job. And that sounded good to me, so we called up, and I had an interview with Plumrose in Copenhagen, the big city.
Yeah, the big city.
And
so what was that like? Was that your first time going to Copenhagen?
No, I had been there just a couple of times before, but it was still the very first time. And I got the job, and I had to train. And I was living in a kind of like a pension, It was my first introduction to living and eating in a common area. It was very different, but it was just for a couple of weeks.
Right.
And then I took off to London and was running my own little stand in Selfridges, and I doubled the business there the year I was there because I wanted to do things my way, and they let me. And so it was a really good experience. And it was, of course, during that time that I met Alan.
Yes, my dad.
My future husband.
That's right.
And so he would come over he came to visit one day. And
at the store?
At the store. He came to go shopping at the store and saw me.
Right.
And came over to visit, and we talked, and so he was trying to get a date with me, I guess.
And now you talked to your mom about this, right?
Yeah, and my mother said, well, you can't trust, I found out he was an American, you can't trust American military, because I found that out, that he was a military man. And
that's what your mom said.
That's what my mom said. Anyway, I didn't go out with him, but I said, I'm here every day, so you can come visit me every day if you like. And he was just a few blocks away, so so he came the next day, and that was nice, on his lunch hour. And so he did come to visit. And then one day he didn't come. And I said, yeah, my mother was right. If they don't get their way, then, it's the highway. So 3 weeks later he showed up with all kinds of little presents for my bracelet. He had noticed I had a charm bracelet. So he had a charm from Turkey and from Spain and from Italy, and he told me he was sent off, and he didn't know how to get hold of me. And we have to remember, back in 1960, there were no telephones and no communication, really, and he couldn't get hold of me. So, and I don't remember where that was in our timeline, but and so I said, oh, that was nice. And so he still came to visit. And one day, it was the 19th of September, and he came again and wanted to invite me out for dinner because tomorrow was his birthday. And I said, I don't believe it's your birthday. So he had to pull up his ID card, and it was his birthday. So I said, okay, but I'm going to bring my friend who has the job in Harrods. Okay, then he was going to bring his friend. So we had our first meeting as a foursome on his birthday. Double date, yeah. Yep. 20th of September 1960.
Wow.
Yeah. So so that takes us till 60, and in the meantime my father got very ill and passes away, and I go back to Denmark October, November, December to help my mother in the store. But she wanted me to get on with my life, and she said, I'm going to be fine. I have to sell the store anyway. And so I did go back to London in January and finished up my work for the rest of the year till August, because in England you can only work for 1 year. You get a 1-year work permit back then, and that's it. Yeah.
So when did Dad take the infamous picture of you at your
Well, he
meeting.
must have taken that very soon after he met with me, and how he had any even notion to take a picture of me, I'll never know, or carry a camera. But I guess back then,
well, he always had a camera.
Well, he had a camera. He was a photo pilot, and
Yeah.
he was into photography, of course, in his job in intelligence. But he took.
It's an amazing picture because there's a huge sign that says Danish meat delicacies,
and I'm
there's
standing
Lilian
right under it
with all the ham, and it almost looks like a nurse's uniform.
Oh yeah, well, we had to have a uniform.
Yeah.
And every day I had a rose.
Yep.
Because I had a friend in the flower department, and he would bring me a rose every day.
Yep. Well, you were busy, huh?
I was busy,
Yeah.
And plum rose, I was busy. But this was 60 and then 61. So my year was up and I had to go back to Denmark.
Right.
And Alan, being a pilot, had to fly every month for flight time.
Right.
So he flew over to Denmark to visit me every month in a little twin-engine Beechcraft, and landed at Skrydstrup, which is just half an hour from Kolding. Drove down and picked him up at the airfield, and he came to visit, and so we were kind of
And you just drove your car?
Oh, just drove the car right on to the airfield.
Right out to the airplane.
Up to the plane and pick him up, That's how it was back then, 100 years ago, but 1961, that was 61. And so he knew he was going to be going back to America in 62, because 3.5 years in London. So at the end of 61, we were planning to get married and had the wedding in Denmark in March.
Which made the papers.
Which made the
Denmark.
papers, the local papers, because 3 American planes landing in Skrydstrup for the wedding. Was a big deal. And it was a very big deal back then. And they were the guests from London and the best man. And so we had the wedding. And of course, then leaving Denmark, we took he drove his car up from, no, that wasn't at that time. No, so leaving, we had to take the train and the ferry and get back to London. And of course, that's when I was crying at the train station.
So tell us about that. So, and then Dad says, well, why are you crying?
Why are you crying? I says, I don't know. And I says, well, I don't know where I'm going, and everybody knows me here. It's going to be really strange to go someplace, and nobody knows me.
Right, and everybody knew you in the town of Kolding because of the grocery store.
Because of my father, who was a very well-known man for years, and we lived a middle-class life, and well-known businessman and runner, and so everybody knew, of course, Harry Lunn's children. So we were always told, you better behave because everybody knows you, and I'm going to find out if you do anything. And sure enough, from time to time, it would come back, whatever we did. Yeah. And so it was strange to leave and not knowing where I was going.
And where nobody would know you.
Nobody would know me. Of course, first we went back to London to finish up the 3 or 4 months from March till August in London. And that was a wonderful time, going to the theaters and the dinner clubs. And it was very, very special time. And we had a little apartment, and so that was good. Oh, and then I went home in July to say goodbye and to buy furniture.
Right.
And I wanted to have a dining room set of furniture. I wanted to have my Danish furniture, and I bought beautiful rosewood furniture. And then Alan was flying over to pick it up. Yeah. And I didn't think anything about what I was buying. I just bought what I wanted, a buffet and a table and 6 chairs. And it turned out that buffet made it into that Beechcraft airplane with 2 inches to spare. They couldn't get it through the door, hardly. But they did. And I said, don't come home unless you bring a whole layer cake, So he had to go into Saxelhus and get me an Otello lavkage to bring back just to have memories. So he got that furniture back to England, and then that was shipped to the U.S. along with his household items. So I had the Danish furniture that we still have today, but I'm not using it today. But my daughter Janet is using it, and she's loving the Danish style furniture and good quality furniture.
It is. It's amazing furniture.
Yeah, it's been around for 58 years.
Yep, it sure has. Yeah. So that brings you to now moving to the U.S.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so where did you start your journey in the U.S.?
Well, our first trip, of course, coming back to the U.S. was Cherry Point, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So we arrived in London,
Mm-hmm.
and we were supposed to pick up the car, and the car wasn't there, and it had sailed down the river someplace, and we were told we could get it the next day, and so we didn't have any luggage, and I don't know why. We checked into a hotel and with a toothbrush or something, and of course back then it was like, oh, what's going on,
Yeah.
But,
Well, you probably didn't care too much.
And the luggage was someplace, I guess, stored or at the airport or someplace, because we were supposed to go get the car.
Right.
And I'll never forget how hot it was. New York
Yeah.
in August,
Yeah.
it's 100 degrees.
Yep.
And we finally got the car, and it's a little black Volkswagen. Of
Yeah.
course, we get in the Volkswagen and start driving from New York all the way down to North Carolina.
Right.
And we got into New Bern, and we were asking, well, where is Cherry Point? And somebody said, well, you just go down there and take a right and then you take a left at the next traffic light. And we drove and drove and drove, and the next traffic light was 35 miles down the road. But we got there.
Yeah.
So that was in August of 1962.
Mm.
Yeah. That was 62. Was 64.
You go back to Denmark.
I go back to Denmark.
Yes.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
I know that because I was born in Denmark, so
In
you had to have been
in
there.
64, that's right. So that summer of 64, he gets orders to go overseas. So I was going back to my mother.
Right.
And we drove the Volkswagen together across the country to park it in his mother's house in Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
So we would have the car when he came back a year later.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, in the meantime, I got pregnant with you.
Thank you.
And we go to Norfolk this time to the NATO staff office, St. U.S. Navio, I think, staff in Norfolk.
Right.
And so we were there for a couple of years, and he gets sent overseas again. Of course, in this time, he's in Vietnam, and he's going back to Vietnam. And I go back again to Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming back from there, we end up in Springfield.
Yep.
In
69.
69, yeah.
Yep.
So basically, we've been in this area since 69. What is that, 51 years?
It's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time,
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Springfield very well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we get to Springfield, then we have some illness in our family.
Lots of different illnesses. Yeah,
that was a
that's
difficult time.
That was difficult, but we survived.
Yes.
We're here.
Yes. And then you eventually go into real estate.
Right. So I guess I've sort of I guess we should back up and say that one day I get a call from the Foreign Service Institute.
Yes, that's right.
That they need a Danish teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been going to Janet's class, I think it was Janet's class, talking about Christmas in Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
And some little child in that class told the parents about my visit, and that's how they found me, and they were desperate to get a Danish teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down for the interview and got the job to teach Danish at the Foreign Service.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, it was not completely full-time. The good thing about the job, it was 9 to 3 at that time.
Right.
It later became a full-time job. But when I had you in class, I could get home by the time you got home from school at 3:30. So it was a perfect time. You would leave at 8:30 in the morning to go to school for 9, and I would leave also. So it worked out perfect.
Yep.
So I was there teaching Danish actually for 13 years,
Wow.
which was a great career,
Yep.
great experience. And then one Christmas in 1984, we went to a dinner party at Alan's friend's house, and it was a big Catholic family, and she was so excited, telling me that she had just passed the real estate exam, and she was going to go into real estate. And I was just so amazed, and I said, wow, if you can do it, I can do it too.
Mm-hmm.
Not even thinking, could be insulting, I guess, saying it that way. but 7 kids,
Yeah.
and going into real estate, and I had 2 kids.
Yeah.
And I figured, wow, I can do that. So I marched up to Nairi Real Estate School in January after the holidays, and signed up on my own, and went to class every weekend. And I remember vividly, there was Alan, we turned off the TV, he was fine, no TV or anything. 7 o'clock every night, I had to study. I had to do 30 pages a night to keep up, and I worked full time, keeping up with everything. And the more I got into the classes and into learning, the more excited I was about the whole thing, and I was ready to jump out and start selling before I was even finished with class.
Right.
So I finished my class, I guess June, I think it was. June, took the test, had to take the state exam, and then gave my notice to the State Department I would not be coming back in the fall.
Right.
And started selling real estate in August 1985, and never looked back.
No, you didn't.
No, that's right. That's right, never looked back.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you like what you're hearing on this episode of the Go With John show, please tell your friends and have them sign up for news and show updates at gowithjohn.com. All right, so now let's talk about real estate, because that is really what where we are today, and
That's
it's
right.
what you're famous for sure.
Yeah.
But so tell us how, because a lot of people will ask me, how did your mom do it?
Yeah.
And I say it's not really how you do it now that they want to hear. It's how did you get started?
Yeah, and that's so hard to even explain, because
is.
the way I got started wouldn't exist today.
Well, I would say you're probably right, but I think a lot of those elements are key to people's success, because you did a lot of door knocking, and I mean, there was a lot of things you did.
Yeah, and you can still do today,
Exactly.
but essentially today you carry it on to a different type of marketing, but it still means consistent marketing and letting everybody know you're still here, and how do you do that?
But so how did you get started? So when you started in real estate, how did you get your first clients?
Well, I wore my name tag,
Yeah.
which I never do anymore.
Yeah, but it's still recommended for new agents
it is
today
still recommended.
to wear
I wore
their
my
name
name
tag.
tag, and I remember being up in Nordstrom at the mall and getting some makeup, and a woman was saying, "Oh, I see you're in real estate," and I said, "Yes," and she said, "Oh, I have a really good friend, and he is looking to sell his condo in Alexandria." And I said, "Great, that would be, I would love to help him." And she said, "You know what, give me your card and I'll have him give you a call." And I thought I would never hear again. Well, 2 days later, I got a call.
Right.
And I'd never even been down in that area in Alexandria, where today I know places everywhere.
Yeah.
But it was the Mont Eagle condominiums in Alexandria, which were beautiful and new at that time.
Right.
And I just prepared myself with the listing appointment and listing material that we could do back then, which was very different than today, because we didn't have all the print pretty pieces
Or the data,
or the
even the
brochures
data,
and
I
the
think
data.
that's available, yeah.
And I just went in on that listing appointment as if I had been selling real estate all my life, and he was very impressed, and I signed up the listing, and I got out of there, and I thought, oh, man, wow, I got it.
That was your first
that
listing?
That was my first listing, yeah.
Yep. From wearing your name tag.
From wearing my name tag,
while you were shopping.
Yeah. And then, of course,
Did you sell that one?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
of
good.
course, yeah. But of course, back then, it was always about farming and farming and farming.
Well, what does farming mean?
And
even?
farming means that you're designated an area where that is yours, and it was divided up by the broker, and it was really very awful because the area I was designated to farm, I looked at the sales, and Alan and I were saying, well, if you do everything you can and network in that farm, it looks like you might sell one house a year. Now, how are you going to survive on that?
Right.
But you couldn't work in anybody else's territory. It was actually pretty bad.
Yeah.
And of course, you come in as a new agent, and all the existing agents, they had their farms.
Right.
And you were told how to do it, send out newsletters and send out information and magazines. We had magazines back then with Shannon and Lux. But this essentially, I decided that my farming was going to be where I was listing and selling. Because now I sold one unit. So I sent out a card, a very amateur-looking piece of paper back then, 35 years ago, that I had sold this unit, and I actually managed to get quite a few more listings over a period in those. There were two buildings. Then somehow it dried up, and you move on, to the next. But it still was letting everybody know you're there and try and get more business in the same place. And then I remember I met someone, and they had a condo at Seven Corners, all those condos in there off of Wilson Boulevard. And I got the listing, and I went over and I rolled up flyers and put in the door handles, and I went up and down stairs in all those buildings, and Alan would sit in the parking lot and wait for me because it was dinner time.
Right.
And I would put flyers on the windshields back then.
Yeah.
And I managed to get quite a bit of business in there too. And as I was learning and seeing how this business really works, because I had to go get all the business. I didn't go to school here with friends that grew up with me and graduated and had families and say, you come sell my house. I literally had to go fight for every property that I got, every piece of business I had to go out and get on my own. And so and then I started realizing land, I was always interested in construction and building, and I was paying attention to a little house sitting on 10 or 15 acres of land. And I remember one tract of land on Spring Hill Road. It took me 6 months for the little lady to even open the door for the first time. I kept driving up to her driveway and leaving my card in her doorway and knocking on the door, and one day she opened the door. And she said, well, I get this all the time, but you keep coming back. And I said, I'd just love to visit with you. Can I help you move from here? What would you like? She invited me in, and it was the beginning of a long friendship. She actually brought me a whole stack of letters from people and builders that have written her that they wanted to buy her property, but she didn't trust anybody.
And what was her first name?
Lucille.
Yes, remember Lucille.
And so, so we sat down, and I came to visit her every week. We had a cup of coffee, and we got to know each other. And I said, I can help you. Well, it turned out she really would like to move. She was sitting there all by herself on her 20 acres, I think she had. And it was a lot to take care of, and the taxes were high. And so, but everything I did, I had to go through her attorney. And it turns out he was a real, we don't need to say any words in our business, but he certainly was not looking out for her.
Right.
But still, she trusted him. And I said, that's fine. And I remember sitting in a meeting with him and his partner and myself, and I was telling him exactly what I was going to do, and he begrudgingly agreed that I should have the listing. I think he had other things he wanted to do with that piece of land, like get it for himself.
Gotcha.
So with the listing in hand, I went out and I contacted my first contact that I had in mind, and I sold it. So it was sold in
Nice.
24 hours.
And then Lucille got to go where
And
she
then
wanted to go.
Lucille got to go to a little house downtown McLean that
Yep.
was manageable for her.
Yeah.
And so that was my first land deal. And then I had this huge piece of land up at Tyson's Corner, 123 and Old Courthouse Road, 45 acres. All these little houses, and I started visiting house to house. And took me weeks and months, and I had to gain their confidence. So many people had tried to put that piece of property together, and they didn't trust me either. And they think they could do a hotel, they think they could do townhouses and get $30 a square foot, and I said you can get between $6 and $8 a square foot. So it took them a while to accept it. But I did my homework, met with the supervisors. Jack Harity was one way back as Harity's dad, as it is now.
Yeah.
And I had done my homework. You could only do single-family homes on that tract of land. No
Right.
townhouses, no commercial. Old Courthouse Road was the cutoff line.
Right.
And so I began to sign up enough homeowners beginning to trust me. I got the listing signed. But I would go there almost, stop by on my way home every day and visit one homeowner. And I did that for 2 years.
Yeah. So you invested, so it's a lot of door knocking.
A lot of door knocking, a lot of visiting, and knowing your
building
stuff.
relationships and taking the time
Right.
to...
and knowing what you're doing. You got to know what you're doing and what you're
Yeah.
talking about. So you
Yeah.
have to learn all of that.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, after 2 years, I succeeded in putting enough tracts of land together to sell. And the average sales price in there, if you moved right away, you got $6 a square feet. The people that waited till the bulldozers came, they ended up with $7 to $8 a square foot. And I remember, so it was an agent in my office that sold it to a builder.
Yeah.
And it was the largest commission check paid out so far in that office when I was paid for that tract of land.
Amazing.
But that was right before the downturn of the end of the 80s, and the builder ended up giving it back to the bank, and another builder picked it up in January and built 75 houses on that property. But I still got paid for selling the land, so that was very exciting.
Right. Yeah.
I did another tract of land again on a house that sat on many acres on Spring Hill Road, and was able to sell that, and it got divided into 11 lots. So there were 2 tracts actually on Spring Hill Road in McLean.
So when you got into the real estate business, did it turn out to be what you thought it was going to be, or did it turn out to be something completely different?
No, I never thought it turned out to be anything that I thought, because I didn't know what it was going to be.
Yeah.
I just knew selling.
Yeah.
I just knew your intelligence to put it together, have the right answers. But I knew one thing for sure, always to do the right thing. Always to make sure that you can look yourself in the mirror. And just always, your reputation is all you have.
Absolutely.
You start going off your reputation, so I would go a long mile around to make sure everything was always done right. To this day.
Yep, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories
Right,
that
but I
we've
have-
heard at the dinner table.
Right, but I have one actually that goes back to all this. So I start getting calls, I advertise a lot. I believe in print advertising, even at this time of my career. But somebody called me on Lee Highway with a Centerville address. And I went out to see this house. And it was a little white house on 5 acres, and they just wanted to move. Well, the minute I pulled in the driveway, I heard a big explosion. And I thought, oh my God, what is going on? Well, it turned out it was next to a stone quarry where they're doing blasting every day. And then across the street, I noticed was a asphalt plant.
Yeah.
And I thought, these people are never going to sell this house.
Yeah.
And to a residential, it's going to have to go commercial.
Right.
So I went in to visit, and it was a shock of my life. My first experience coming into a home where there was it was a hoarder, a little pathway through the house, but the hoarding was Cabbage Patch dolls in boxes.
Oh, no.
Thousands of them.
Oh, my goodness.
They were stacked from floor to ceiling. She collected Cabbage Patch dolls, which were very famous, popular at that time.
Right.
In the 80s.
This was right after the pet
90s.
rock, right?
Yeah. And I said this was really going to be difficult to sell as a residential because of what's going on around you, but I'm going to give it a shot and see if we can sell it to the quarry next door or to the asphalt factory across the street. And so I said, well, but let me take a look at the house. And so I was on my way to the basement. And she said, oh, no, don't go in the basement. And I said, okay. Yeah, because I have a big snake down there, and he lives down there. But that's a good thing because he keeps the mice away. And I said, okay. So, of course, I didn't go down in the basement with this big snake down there. And I came up and halfway back up again, and I just said, I will try and see if I can sell your home in some ways, but I never could. I tried to meet with people. They didn't want to buy that 5 acres. They wanted 20 acres.
Right.
They didn't want to take it as part of their home.
Yeah.
So that was an experience
Yeah.
with a snake in the basement.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard that one yet. So, but where I was going was we have, and I've often said to you, you should write a book. And you always say to me, if I wrote a book, nobody would believe it.
Nobody would believe it. Nobody would read it. I know.
Yeah, but but there was one story that went on and on and on and on.
Yeah,
and you know the one I'm talking about. So we'll just refer to them as Mr. and Mrs. Seller.
Okay.
So we have
a beautiful home in a lovely neighborhood
in Vienna. Yep.
And I got the call to come out and sell the house. And it was a mess, and there were several children still at home. Older children, but teenagers.
Yeah.
And then they had 2 big dogs, and they were always tied up outside, and it was nothing but a mud pile. So, of course, if the dogs were let in, it was mud all over in the house, just for starters.
Right.
And it was also the house where things were stacked up in the basement from floor to ceiling. And I asked the question, do you have a rough-in bath in the basement? Because I couldn't see anything.
Yep.
Oh, yes, we do.
Yep.
And the reason I didn't dispute him was because I'd sold other houses with a finished basement and a full bath. So I had no...
In that neighborhood,
next door.
Yeah.
I had no reason to dispute the fact that there was or was not a bathroom. It was difficult times. I can't remember. It must have been beginning of the 90s. Interest rates were high. Houses were not selling. And they were getting divorced. And the only way we could show that house was with 2 lockboxes on the door. He was living in the master bedroom with the lockbox on his door. And she was living in the other bedrooms. And then he had a lockbox on the door to the basement because the basement was his. And of course, the house didn't look nice. It wasn't really cleaned up, and the dogs and the mud and everything. I think it was 7, 8, 9 months, and we finally get a contract from somebody who's willing to clean it up.
Yeah.
And so now I have to help her find a place to be. Don't worry about my ex. He knows where he's going. He's going to travel. He has a U-Haul. And he's leaving town. And I said,
but meanwhile, during this whole time, she's calling, saying how difficult it is. We need to get the house sold. I have to move on.
I got all the expenses. I got to get the house sold. And I says, well, I'm doing all I can, but under the circumstances. So finally, we get an offer on the house. And now she has to find a place to live, and she had $125,000 for her. So we went to Reston, and at that time was able to find a nice little townhouse that we could get for $125,000. So she was cash free and no debt or anything. And so we get to the day of moving and getting everything ready, and the house is vacant, and walk through. And I said, well, your husband's car is out here. Why? I thought he was starting to drive west. And she said, no, he's actually going to live with me. And I said, what are you talking about? We have been trying to get you two separated for 9 months, and you're telling me that he's going to move in with you?
And this was almost a War of the Roses scenario.
Totally War of the Roses, because every night he would call me to tell her something, and she would call me to tell him something. Yeah. And it was every night or every week I had to play attorney and psychologist and psychiatrist and marriage counselor, marriage counselor, as if I had nothing else to do.
And then you get the house sold.
We get the house sold.
She buys a new house.
She moves to Reston into this house.
And then they move back in together.
Yeah. And I said, what in the world are you thinking about? And she said, well, I need the money, and he's paying me rent. And I said, no way.
Yeah,
no way.
It was incredible.
It was just
I remember that.
Just crazy.
So the interesting, I think a lot of folks out there, they think they want to go into real estate.
Sure.
And I think, in my earlier years with clients, I heard over and over and over and over, we'd be driving around looking at houses, and somebody would eventually say, almost every week I heard it, oh my gosh, I love driving around looking at houses. I think I want to go into real estate.
Yeah.
And I always say, well, you should do that.
Yeah.
Because I can't really explain that.
What the job is.
Yeah, looking at houses is just such a small part of what it is. The human element and the situations you get into, the snake in the basement, the couple that needs to sell their home so they can move on with their life. Shockingly, they get back together. Yeah. That's when we still laugh about it in our house today. But there's all these things that happen in the real estate business, and every day you don't know where it's going.
No.
Every day you get a new thing.
No, it's a different scenario every day. Yeah. You just don't know. And it's a lot more than just drive around and look at houses, of course. You have to have the intelligence behind knowing where to take people and what the houses look like and what they really want and qualifying and all of that. Yeah.
John Jorgenson here. If you want to become a real estate agent, contact us through the Go With John show at gowithjohn.com, and we will put you in touch with a professional over at Long & Foster who can walk you through the process. Again, that's gowithjohn.com. So what's your favorite part about the industry now?
I think getting the phone call to make an appointment with me for you to come over and sell my house. I think that is a very exciting phone call that they call me, I don't call them.
Yes. Because that's not the way it used to be.
Right. I had to go call everybody. I had to go figure it out. But you have come to the point in your life where you get the calls, you are trusted, and you have good recommendations, and people recommend you. And then going for the visit, and then to do the right things, say the right words, work with a stager. What is the most gentle way to tell them we have to do A, B, and C to get the house in sellable condition for the highest amount of money? Going through that whole process, and then you go through all the marketing, and then you say thank you very much and give me a call. Then you leave, and then you do get the call. We want to list with you, and we want you to be our agent. Or you actually are sitting there and they're saying, no, we're good to go. We'd love for you to take care of this house. I think that's the most exciting part, that you did it. It's a little bit of a game. It's a hunt, and you got to do the job. And then when you get in return, you get a call from the neighbor, we want you to come over and we want to meet you because we want to sell our house.
Right.
So there have been good vibes going back and forth, and I think this is the most rewarding part of the business. And then, of course, solving the problems along the way can be very frustrating. All kinds of problems come up. And you never know from day to day what they're going to be.
And sometimes you get a truckload.
Yep, you got a boatload.
Day after day after day. Yeah.
And otherwise, it's like a dream.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is really interesting about the way you do your business is you do almost everything yourself. I mean, you have a couple of really great assistants.
Well, yeah, but they do the paperwork.
Exactly.
Because I have chosen to use my brain and my intelligence in a different way, I finally gave up being so possessive. I finally let go. That was very, very difficult.
Of the paperwork?
Of the paperwork, yeah. It was very, very difficult because I was doing it all because I was the only one that could do it.
Right.
So I've given up the paperwork and the entering the information into multiple listing and all of that paperwork.
But you're doing everything else.
But I'm doing everything else,
Yeah,
right.
You're going to every listing appointment.
Every listing
every
appointment,
settlement,
every home
single
inspection.
contract negotiation.
I meet every appraiser at the property.
Yeah.
I'm at every settlement. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm doing all of that. I don't send an assistant to go to home inspection. I don't send an assistant to go to settlement.
Right.
So
Or to meet the appraiser.
Yeah,
right.
or to meet the appraiser. I'm doing all of that. But
Yeah.
I have an assistant who can run the emails and answer emails and
Yeah.
follow up on paperwork that
Yeah.
can be done
And
clerical
help with coordinating
work.
your calendar and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything you would have done differently?
Probably not. No, because how do you know?
Yeah, that's true.
You don't know. You only
Yeah.
know you got here by doing A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Had you done it the other way, you don't know where
Yeah.
you would have been.
Yep. So now, how has technology changed the industry? Do you think it's a good thing? Or?
I think the technology has changed everything a lot. I think the biggest thing that has changed is everyone knows the properties now before almost we know them. And that wasn't so before. You had to get in the car and go take them there. So the
Right.
fact that everybody can see everything on the internet definitely has changed. But it's really wonderful that we as agents are still needed. Yes, you can go see it on the internet. We still need to take you in. We still need to advise you. Still need to work with you on the contracts and on offers and hold everything together. You get 10 offers on a property. How are you going to do it? You know, it takes intelligence, and sometimes you win one where you normally wouldn't have won it, but they know you
Right.
versus everybody else.
Right.
And so you still need that human touch. But technology definitely has changed everything. I don't necessarily like all the changes, but I'm doing just fine with what I'm doing. So I'm not gonna change my ways.
Yeah.
But people choose to sit and do everything on their phones,
Yeah.
and I still like to have directions so I know where I'm going, because
Yeah.
GPS screws me up every 5 times.
Yeah.
And they take me for a joyride or whatever it's
Joyride.
called. Joyride,
Yeah.
someplace. And I said, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And like.
So you still put the directions in your listings for everybody else?
Yeah, and I do it consequently, and only 50% or 25% of the agents do.
Yeah.
And it will say in the listing, use GPS.
Yeah.
You know. But I believe, and I have a photographic memory. I read those directions,
Yeah.
and I know exactly where I'm going. But I put it in a GPS, and I don't know where I'm going, because it
Yep.
only takes you one street at a time, or
Exactly.
maybe a little area at a time.
Right.
So I still love to have my map if I can have an overview of where I'm going. And by the directions, I already know approximately where I'm going to be. By the name of the subdivision, I have an idea, again, because I have been everywhere in the whole Northern Virginia
Right. So you
area.
read the directions and it just.
It just
You-
jives for
exactly.
me, and that's a tremendous help.
Yeah. So one of the things that was really interesting in your early years, we talked about this the other day, how you used to run out in the middle of the night to get things signed, right?
Yes.
So when we talk about technology,
yeah.
So
my
talk
God.
about, for the folks listening that are youngsters who don't realize the internet hasn't been here forever. Tell them how we used to sell houses.
Well, we would meet the seller in their home after dinner because God forbid they had to have their dinner. You can come over at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock. And you would sit down and present your contract in person, which of course is very nice. And sometimes there would be 2 or 3 contracts, but if it's just one, with all the explanation and everything that goes with the paperwork. I think we've gotten better at pre-educating our sellers so they know what's coming, but they didn't. This goes back 35 years ago. So contracts were never correct. There was never the right price, so they got counter-offered. And I would sell houses in, wherever the buyers could afford to go, in Springfield, in Dale City, and I went as far as Fredericksburg, Stafford County. I would be way out in Burke or way out in Fairfax, and I live in Vienna. My office is McLean. And so you would drive to your seller to get the counter offer and present everything, and then you would drive home to either fax the counter offer or go meet the agent with the contract.
So you could be out until 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right. So finally, so then the other agent was waiting for me to come back with a counter offer, and she would meet her clients, and then she would get it to me, but it wasn't ratified until it was delivered.
Right.
And so we'd have to drive all the way back to whatever, Dale City or Woodbridge or wherever it was, to deliver that it was ratified. And we used to call ourselves the Beltway Bandits because we would be driving around the Beltway at night, and it would be 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock. I've been out till 2 o'clock. I got lost in Lawton one time. It was pitch black in the winter, and I couldn't find my direction. And that was, we actually, back then, the first cell phone in the car, I had this huge monster. And I would call my husband. I said, I don't know where I am. It's pitch black, and I knew the cross street, and he'd look it up on the map, and he says, well, take a right and do whatever. But that was then, and of course we were selling a lot of properties in outside McLean and Vienna because they were cheaper sometimes, so first-time buyers, and we'd have to go for townhouses, and it was driving around the Beltway.
So you really had to know where you were going.
Absolutely.
You had to have a map. You had to be able to read a map.
Absolutely
You didn't always.
Right. You had to have a map. You had to know where you were going. And I always looked at the whole tour and everything before getting in the car. So I knew exactly looking at the map, and that's why all the younger generation, of course, are laughing about a map because nobody knows what a map looks like. I don't know how to use it, but it really is wonderful if you really want to have the big picture concept.
Absolutely. So what would you say to the younger agents that are getting into the business now? Do you have any advice for them?
Well, I think I would say you have to start somewhere. And you have to get your clients and people to know you. If they don't know who you are, they don't know how to call you. If they don't ever see you, they don't know who you are either. And I think you start with where you get your business. But once you get a piece of business, I think it's crucial that you work around that piece of business because those are the people that know you.
Right.
And even today, I mean, I was lucky to get a listing in Stratford Landing in the Alexandria, Mount Vernon area. So, and when I listed the property, my client said he hadn't slept for 3 nights because I priced it at $750. And he talked to 4 other agents, and they said $650 and $660, and not a dime over $700. And I come in, and I tell him $750. And Lilian, are you sure? And I said, trust me. And he said, okay, I trust you. I said, if you'll do what I tell you to do, you have to paint, you have to change your light bulbs, you have to change the appliances. This was an old house, but it was really beautiful and beautifully maintained. but it just needed, a little bit of updating, and they moved out, and he did everything, and we were ready to go, and he says, Lilian, I'm still not sleeping over that price. Are you sure we shouldn't drop the price? And I said, Bill, trust me. He said, okay, I trust you. Well, we went online. Beautiful house, beautiful pictures, wonderful floor plans, great presentation, and we had 5 contracts in one day.
Wow. And sold for?
Full price, because the one we took had nothing in it.
Right. No contingencies.
Nothing. Yeah.
Right.
No
risk.
contingencies. Nothing.
Yes.
Nothing. $750.
Yeah.
But they were willing to escalate to $775.
Right.
We had another offer that started at $770.
Yeah.
With a home inspection, 6 days to void only, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So all the other contracts had stuff in it.
Right.
But the fact still was they all started at my price.
Yes.
So we took the one with nothing in it, settlement in 3 weeks, and we're going to settlement next week.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll be damned. And I called him up and I said, well, I asked you to trust me, and you did, and I thank you. And I said, now tell your neighbors. And he said, oh my God, my neighbors have been already texting me. There's an under contract signed on Monday morning, and it was Sunday. We ratified Monday, and I got the under contract up the same day.
Wow.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
You got to do it right away. So the neighbors are texting him, you sold your house?
Yeah.
I said, you just tell your neighbors to call me. So the moral of this story is, I would love to have 10 more listings in Stratford Landing. It takes me 40 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
But if you're smart about it and have your 2 lock boxes there, you can minimize your trips, and the house is going to sell, and then you're done. Money in the bank.
And then you're working around
always
what you
working
already
around.
have.
My sign has been hanging there, and my sign is still there. The neighbors know me. I immediately sent out a card. We had multiple contracts sold full price. I didn't wait for the sold card to go out at settlement.
Yep.
And I'm beginning to see that's a little bit the key. I've done that in other neighborhoods, and like sold in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And they get that card, and then they get the card when it sells. And they also get a just listed card, of course. So I pinged that neighborhood maybe 3 times.
Yeah. Well, so what's funny about this, and I don't know if you'll remember this, about 10 years ago or 8 years ago, you and I were sitting at a Long & Foster event. One of the guys over at Long & Foster was giving a presentation and talking about the Facebook and the Twitter and all the things that you have to do online. And you kept tapping me on the shoulder, and you kept on the knee, and you kept saying, we still got to send just listed cards, and we still have to pick up the phone, and we have to call, and we still have to do this. So all this technology that was occurring in this speech, you say you just have to stick to the basics. And the funny thing was, at the very end of his speech, he says, you still got to pick up the phone and call people, and then you say, "You see, I told you."
That's
so
right.
it's the contact,
it's the contracts and visibility, and all the other things are wonderful, and of course, social media is wonderful.
But the old school stuff
there's a huge,
works.
Yeah, right.
Works.
But there's a huge part of the population that don't do Facebook, believe it or not.
Right.
And I sell to anybody. I don't care if you're 90 or 85 or 75 or 10 years old. I'll take everybody.
Yeah.
And so you cater to certain groups of people, and you want to reach them all.
Right.
But you still got to go the old-fashioned way.
So your advice to the young agents is just make contact. And I think there's a lot to be said about the postcard in the mail or the phone call versus something electronic. There's something about the electronic communication that is not as weighted. Right. I think it comes in very quickly, and it comes out flashing very quickly.
It disappears.
In front.
And I have actually had, I don't know what to say about all these, hit all your clients, at least once a month with emails and everything. I have had some wonderful clients of mine send me an email saying, Lilian, take me off your email list, which I did not like to hear.
Yeah.
They didn't want my email.
Right. Yep. They want the phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you as an agent, as an individual, you have to find your way. And of course, my famous saying is when Frank Sinatra sings in his farewell song on stage, I did it my way.
Yep.
And we are all individuals, and you have to do it your way because you are who you are.
Yeah.
And yes, take all the information you hear, but you still have to apply it to how do you come across? How do you like to work? How do you like to get up in the morning? I like to get up in the morning and get dressed and be ready for the day. I'm ready to list and sell any time of the day. That's how I like to be. Mm-hmm. Somebody else likes to wake up and stay in their jammies for half a day and then go out in their tennis clothes for the other half a day and then wait for the phone call. That's not how I want to work.
Right.
And so you have to find out, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want in life? And then just remember, the sky is the limit. If it is to be, it's up to me.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to give it to you. And I think that's the hardest thing to understand. Where are all these referrals and where are all the reloads and what about this? And I thought he was going to call me. There just isn't anything. You got to make it happen. You have to put in the effort in all the different ways that you know how to get the client.
Yeah, I think the reality is if you take your destiny into your own hands, you can drive it wherever you want to drive it, right?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Yeah, if you're waiting for some other mechanism to make it happen for you, it's not going to happen.
No, it's not
right?
going to happen.
So all the tools are there.
It's all there, yeah.
Yeah, all the information's there. You've got to take it and make it your own.
Yeah.
And then really, I think the bottom line is you got to go knock on doors.
Yeah.
You got to go spend some shoe leather.
Yeah, but of course, people don't like knocking on doors in reality today.
True.
But you've got to follow up is maybe a better word than follow up and
network. Meet
yeah.
people. Yeah. Good.
And I think I miss the whole activity of the brokers open. So in the earlier years, the broker open houses were fantastic. All the agents would come all the time. And it was a great way to meet agents and to let them know who you are and you know who they are.
Right.
And you learn from all the people that come and you listen and all the interaction we had. But brokers opens have gone by the wayside. Agents are lazy. They don't feel like going. I don't have to go. I can look at the house on the internet. But they're losing sight of why we did all of that in the first place, the camaraderie.
Yeah.
And hearing things and knowing things. And we used to hear about financing and great buys and stories. And you take all of that and mold it into your brain, that you learn from that and it stays with you. Now everybody sits at home in their office and there's no interaction. Of course, we're in a difficult period right now, but just in general, you don't see the excitement of everybody getting together. I mean, it's changed a lot. So I don't know how the new agents, they are making it, but how they're making it, I don't know.
So another piece of advice that I'm hearing for the new agents is go out and meet some of the other agents that are at the Brokers Open and talk to them and introduce yourself and get to and learn from them.
Yeah, and I used to go to, when I was new, I would go to open house every Sunday and I would observe, because this was now my new profession, and I would go into an open house and there would be somebody sitting there knitting and said, "Hi, how are you?" I said, "I'm great, I'm Lilian, you know." And I said, "Yeah, go ahead and take a look at the house." And I would just keep knitting. And others would be not on the phone because we didn't have phones back then, but they would be reading or preoccupied. And that told me exactly who I did not want to be.
Right.
I did not want to be that agent. I wanted to be observant. I wanted to have a conversation. No matter if another agent comes into your open house, strike up a conversation and find out something about that other agent, about the house and everything in the meantime.
Right.
Because there's got to be some information that comes across that you can use.
Yep.
Or maybe information about that house. You went there to see the house, and you got to get familiar with the territory. You got to know the inventory. I can tell you the inventory and the houses and the price ranges of almost everything in Northern Virginia.
It's amazing.
Because I've been there.
Yeah.
And I've sold there.
Yeah.
And so prices change, conditions change, but pretty much, and you got to beat the path. You got to get out there and, you just got to get out there and do it.
You got to just do it. Well, that's a great way to end it. Well, Mom, thanks for
You're welcome.
sitting down and telling this great story. That was awesome. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Go with John show. Please subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice and keep up with our latest episodes and what's going on with the show at gowithjohn.com. That's gowithjohn.com.